Twilight draped Windsor Castle in a deep violet hush, the fading sun brushing its ancient stones with the last strokes of dying light. Inside the private royal library, candles flickered with deliberate restraint, casting gold shivers across rows of leather-bound volumes. The air smelled of beeswax, old parchment, and history itself, history holding its breath. Princess Anne sat alone at the grand mahogany desk. Above her hung a portrait of her younger self, fierce, focused, unshakable. Time had refined her steel rather than softened it. She remained the family's quiet shield, the one least swayed by drama, least disturbed by rumor. Yet tonight, even she felt the ground shift. An unmarked envelope rested before her. No crest. No insignia. No ceremony. That, in itself, made it ominously loud. Dangerous truths rarely arrive dressed in tradition. And stared at it for a long moment before finally breaking the seal. The paper inside looked painfully ordinary, its clinical phrasing almost cold. But the words struck with the force of a silent explosion. DNA analysis complete. Maternal lineage verified. Princess Diana confirmed. Anne's hand stilled midair. The fire crackled behind her like a witness gasping. A thick silence wrapped the room, the kind that follows revelation, not disaster. She exhaled. Slowly. Controlled. So, it's true. Memories unspooled in her mind, not tender recollections but sharp impressions. Diana's dazzling smile masking exhaustion. Her quiet defiance beneath layers of grace. The way she once whispered to and during a rare moment of candor. One day everything will change. And when it does, the truth will matter more than tradition. And had dismissed it as emotional poetry. But now, staring at the proof, she felt the weight of what Diana had carried alone. Outside, the evening bells began to toll, their slow, solemn notes drifting through the castle like a warning. And rose abruptly, pacing across the polished stone. Her boots echoed with agitation she rarely allowed herself to show. Diana, even in death, had delivered one final revelation. Not gossip. Not scandal. Legacy. A truth capable of rewriting everything. She stopped at the window. Beyond it, the moon washed the grounds in silver, illuminating centuries of royal order that now trembled in her hands. The moon hung over Windsor like an ivory sentinel, silent and indifferent to the storm unfurling inside the castle's oldest walls. Princess Anne remained at the window long after the bells fell quiet, her breath fogging faintly against the cold glass. For once, her famously disciplined mind refused to slot the moment neatly into order. It sprawled, messy and conflicted, like a tapestry unraveling under a hidden blade. Behind her, the letter lay open on the desk, patient, damning, waiting. A secret child. Diana's secret child. Anne's thoughts clawed backward through time. There had been signs. Subtle ones. The kind only someone as perceptive, and as suspicious, as Anne would have noticed, even if she'd ignored them then. The unexplained medical appointments Diana slipped into without explanation, protected by staff who had sworn peculiar oaths of silence. Her brief absences from public duties disguised as private retreats or charity visits. The change, that slight, unspoken shift, in her posture, her eyes, her guardedness. Anne recalled one particular afternoon vividly. Kensington Palace. Rain tapping the windows like impatient fingers. Diana standing at the far end of the drawing room, clutching her elbow in that way she did when she was thinking too deeply. You don't have to keep everything inside, you know, Anne had said. Diana smiled, a smile that tried to be light but didn't reach her eyes. Some truths are safer in shadows, Anne. You understand that more than anyone. Anne hadn't asked what she meant. She wasn't one for emotional riddles. But now she understood. Now she saw it clearly. Diana had been preparing her, in her own way. A knock shattered the stillness. Anne turned sharply. Enter. The door opened hesitantly, revealing Michael, one of the oldest footmen assigned to the private wing. His face was pale, the kind of pale that suggested he'd been debating whether to disturb her at all. Your Royal Highness, he said softly, bowing. His Majesty requests your presence. At once. Anne's jaw tightened. Charles. Of course the king would know something was afoot, Rumours travelled faster through old palaces than through newspapers. Did he say why? She asked. No. Only that it is urgent. The word settled in the space between them like a lead weight, and folded the letter back into its envelope. Her fingers lingered on the paper, unwilling to let go, yet desperate to distance herself from it. She slipped it into the inside pocket of her jacket, close to her heart. Very well, she murmured. Tell him I'm on my way. As the footman disappeared down the corridor, and paused at the threshold of the library, taking a final look at the room behind her, the books, the candlelight, the centuries of collected wisdom. She had come seeking answers, but the truth she found was more volatile than she'd imagined. She stepped out. The corridor seemed narrower tonight, shadows clinging to stone arches like conspirators. The portraits lining the walls, monarchs long gone, their eyes forever painted with judgment, watched her pass in silence. The walk to the king's private study felt longer than ever. At the door, she paused. A murmur of voices seeped through the wood. One of them was Charles. The other, lower, controlled, belonged to Sir Edmund Howlas, the king's most trusted adviser. And knocked once, firmly. Come in, Charles called out. She entered. Charles stood by the fireplace, his expression strained, a crystal tumbler untouched beside him. His shoulders were tense, too tense for a man who had spent decades perfecting the art of royal composure. Anne, he said quietly, close the door. She obeyed. The latch clicked into place like the locking of fate. Charles glanced at Sir Edmund before returning his gaze to her. I understand you've received something, he said. Not accusatory, not yet, but dangerously close to defensive. And didn't answer. She simply reached into her jacket and placed the envelope on the table between them. Charles stared at it, dread flickering across his face like a shadow. You've read it, then? Yes, Anne replied. I have. A breath left him, not quite a sigh, not quite a groan. Something heavier. Anne, he whispered, this cannot come out. It already has, she said softly. To me. And if it reached me, it can reach others. Sir Edmund stepped forward, his voice crisp. The monarchy has survived war, scandal, abdication, assassination attempts. But this is different. This is bloodline. Anne's eyes flicked to Charles. Did you know? She asked, voice low. A silence. Too long. Too telling. Charles swallowed. I suspected. The room froze. And felt something break, not quite trust, but something adjacent to it. You suspected, she repeated. And you said nothing. What would you have had me do? Charles snapped, his composure cracking. Announce to the world? Chase ghosts? Shame the family with rumours that were impossible to prove? But they're not rumours anymore, Anne said, pulling the paper from the envelope, holding it like a blade. Charles flinched. Sir Edmund took a half-step back. The truth, Anne said, her voice a quiet storm, is standing right here. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Charles looked up at her, eyes weary and scared in a way she had rarely seen. What do we do, Anne? And for the first time in her life, the Princess Royal did not have an answer. The silence inside the king's study stretched like a tightening wire. Charles stood by the mantel, shoulders hunched, fingers gripping the edge of the fireplace as if anchoring himself to stone. And remained still, the DNA report folded neatly in her hand, sharp as a verdict. Sir Edmund lingered near the door like a shadow stitched to the room. Outside, the night deepened. The corridors of Windsor moaned softly, the old castle settling into midnight like a creature turning in its sleep. And broke the silence first. Charles, she said, her voice low but unwavering, you must tell me everything. He turned slowly, as though the movement cost him something vital. There isn't much to tell, he murmured. Suspicion is not knowledge. And knowledge is a kind of ruin. Anne's jaw tightened. You knew Diana was hiding something. Charles's face twitched. Guilt? Fear? Both? I suspected her final months were complicated, he confessed. Her schedule changed. She was evasive. She avoided the usual protocols. I confronted her once, gently, but she only said, "One day, the truth will out, Charles." And inhaled sharply. "And you left it at that." "What else could I do?" Charles snapped suddenly, eyes sharp. "She was Diana, the mother of my sons, the world's saint and my greatest complication." The fire popped violently, scattering sparks across the grate. Sir Edmund cleared his throat. "Your Royal Highness," he said to Anne, "I must ask, has anyone else seen the report?" "Not yet," she answered. "Good." His expression stiffened. "Because if this reaches the public before we know the full extent—" "Before whoever this is reaches us," and interrupted coldly. Sir Edmund bowed his head. "Yes, Charles ran a hand down his face. "This child, if alive, could become a symbol. A banner for those who already whisper that the monarchy has lost its way. It would fracture the line of succession. William would be threatened. The entire institution could splinter." Anne looked at the report again. "And yet," she said quietly, "the truth exists, whether we hide it or not." Charles'